either. Society does not understand what relationships are. We go from a monogamous system to a polyamorous system. The monogamous system is ridden with guilt, heaviness, and responsibility and duty, which just makes bitter people out of both in the end, if followed rigidly. Polyamory is the exact same problem, where people just spill their energy and fuck anything and anyone, and it results in nothing fruitful or productive, and more neurosis and degeneracy, and an unbeautiful life, if that makes sense. And so this whole model of how we view relationships has to be readdressed, because society doesn't understand love to a deep degree. Most humans don't. I wouldn't say I do. I would say I know some things above average, but I'm also still in this. And I would argue that we need to open our perspectives on what healthy relationships are, on what that means, on what that is supposed to entail. Because what we take as gospel or as tradition usually has to do with power, usually has to do with control, and has to do with, well, ego. And sticking to an idea, no matter what, for the sake of power, for the sake of maintaining that power, and for the sake of having that identity remain as it is, being the parent that sacrifices themselves. So that's a martyrdom type of perspective on relationships. Like, I will be the martyr. I will sacrifice myself so you can have a good life, and that will give me meaning. Now, of course, all of these things, when taken into extremes, cause tremendous suffering. Tremendous suffering. The opposite, a guy or a girl who doesn't really take their responsibilities serious at all, or is not sincere with them at all, and just fucks around, cheats, lives as a complete double, lives as a complete two-faced liar, basically, has to act, ends up killing himself, or ends up doing drugs and becoming an addict, or, worse. Resentment kicks in to the degree where he murders the wife. These things happen. And they all happen because we don't understand love. We don't understand what love is. In my perspective, love is what that person needs to do. That is love. What the person needs to figure out for themselves. What that person's unique journey is. And that might align for a couple months, maybe years, maybe even decades. But it could also be that it doesn't anymore after that while. After the 2 months, the 3 years, the 10 decades, not 10 decades, goddamn, the 2 decades, then it might shift. Then it might change. Then the perspective on it might completely get altered by the natural current of life that we can't really control or understand. But we have to embrace, because if we don't, we end up suffering, and we end up halting the growth of the other and ourselves, which is not love. That is not love. Love is a selfless flourishing of life as it is. So it can unify more and more with the divine, more and more with what is, more and more with the universe, more and more with God, more and more with goodness or existence. But if we stop this, then it looks very much like we're blocking not only our own blessings, but also the lessons that the other is supposed to receive. Why? Because we're attached to a rigid idea of what that person needs to mean for us and be for us. And we want to fit him in this image and in this ideal. The most honest way, in my opinion, to go about this is to acknowledge that you are both working through karma. Because that, in my opinion, will lead to the most sincere expression of love. If you can both acknowledge that you're working through karma. Because if you're not, then quite honestly, it looks like you're pretending to want the best for them, but really you just want the best for yourself and the way you want to view them and the way you want them to view you, which of course is very ephemeral and constantly shifting and changes and is never supposed to be stable. But the earlier you accept that fact that it's not supposed to be forever stable, the more flourishing and the more truth and honesty there will be. And as I discussed in a previous video, honesty is the greatest wealth. It doesn't get better than that, you know. There's plenty of rich people that end up killing themselves, shooting themselves, whatever the fuck, you know. Rich people, they're not particularly exuberantly more happy than a person who's just working and being a slave. So honesty is true wealth. And I think if it is about love, then that is what should be discussed. Then that is what should be communicated. And then we already have a system in which marriage almost doesn't make sense anymore. Binding ourselves forever to one being. It is just to ensure responsibility and duty is looked after and the intention is there, which in and of itself is beautiful. But this doesn't need a third party. This is something intimate that you do with your own self and the other does with their own self. Blessings. Love. Bye.